afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. We are so happy you chose to spend some time with us, and we're going to have a lively discussion following the replay of a very timely topic. We're going to be talking about the effects of heat, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm here in the hot weather in Ohio. I came to visit my cousin who turned 99 years old yesterday, Kat Williams, and I'm coming back next year to celebrate her 100. And it was hot, but they had an air-conditioned place in the park, so we had a good time. So, Simon, if you roll our replay so we can get that discussion, we're going to be talking about hot weather and survival of this heat. In the meantime, Barbara, maybe you can tap dance.
You know, I did a lot of dance, but tapping wasn't one of them. I did ballet, African, modern, all that good stuff.
Down there. And I noticed that, especially in the Southeast, it's been really hot and humid. So let's put up the first slide, Simon. And I would invite my co-moderators to speak on some of these slides as we go. We want to give you tips and look out for those alligators that Dr. Neighbor Stevens brought up from Tampa.
Don't leave out the pythons.
As many of you know, I have sometimes a sight impediment, so I ask my co-moderators to help me with some of the slides. Go to the next slide, Simon. So there's something called cardiorespiratory fitness, and it's been linked to cancer risk and mortality. We know that many of us younger people are trying to be fit, walk and run every day and work out in the gym. And there are higher levels of cardiorespiratory fitness that may offer protection from colon cancer, lung cancer, and from lung cancer and prostate cancer. Next slide. So you want to be fit. We know that there's benefits of being fit. There are higher cardiovascular fitness levels may be associated with significantly lower risk of colon cancer, and that risk factor is 0.72 for moderate and 0.63 for high fitness. Let's go to the next slide.
Dr. Maxey, are you going to define cardiorespiratory fitness?
It means that you're able to breathe with a certain level of oxygen intake, that your cardiac abilities make you more functional, that your blood pressure is well controlled. And those are what I call cardiovascular fitness without getting into high technology. Do you have another definition you'd like to add?
Well, some people attach the resting heart rate and maximum heart rate reached during exercise as part of that as well.
And recovery time, right? So after you exercise, how long does it take for your heart rate to come back? After you stop exercising, how long does it take for your heart rate to get back to normal? So the longer it takes for your heart rate to get back to normal after you stop exercising, I'm summarizing, the less fit, right? So the more fit you are, Your heart rate will go up, meet the demand for exercise, right? And then when you stop exercising, it'll come back down, to wherever your baseline is. And the more fit you are, your heart rate won't necessarily go quite as high as it will, like when you exercise, as it will for those of us who are less fit. So for example, lots of times you'll do those calculations for what's your target heart rate, for your age, on the different machines or those kinds of things. When you first start exercising, you might find out that a little bit of walking, right, can get you to that target heart rate. And then as you keep exercising, it will take a higher level of intensity to get to that target heart rate because you are becoming more fit in your cardiorespiratory system.
So on one of our next sessions, I want to go a little bit more into detail because this is queered by the fact that so many older people are taking medicines like beta blockers, eye drops, that have things that don't give you a good resting heart rate in the first place. So it's going to be different. We need to define some of those. But in truth, you're right, Dr. Hines, that how you recover is good. But one person may have a resting heart rate that's healthy at 80 and another at 60. So we have to go a little bit more detail in that. Dr. Walks?
So let me give a concrete example. I like numbers, and this is the weekend of the United States track and field championships. And the technology is amazing now. They've strapped these sort of Fitbit kinds of things on the athletes. Before the women's 100 meters, before the race, they were showing one of the runners whose resting heart rate is 61. And just before the race started, her heart rate was up to 160. Now, if my heart rate is at 160, it's about to stop, and someone needs to call 911, which is why we always talk about consulting with your physician. As Dr. Maxey just said, we all need to know what's normal for us. So having a doc, a family practice doc, a nurse practitioner, someone that can tell you when it's healthy for you to exercise. Don't just go out there and sign up for the next marathon. It's really important that we understand this. So Dr. Maxey, I think it's great that we can go into more depth on this because it's something we can all get outside and walk or run. And if we don't do it carefully, we can have some consequences that are not good.
Okay. Well, looking at hot weather, extreme heat is defined as summertime temperatures that are much hotter and are humid than our average. And because some places are hotter than others, this depends on what's normal, average at where you live in that location at that time of the year. Humid and muggy conditions can make it seem hotter than it really is. Next slide. So there are heat-related illnesses, such as heat exhaustion or heat stroke. They happen when the body is not able to properly cool itself. The body normally cools itself by sweating. During extreme heat, this might not be enough. In many cases, a person's body temperature rises faster than it can cool off. This can cause damage to the brain and other vital organs. In fact, it can cause decay of muscle, kidney failure, and you can actually die from being too hot. Next slide. So heat-related illnesses. Dr. Walks, would you help me with this slide?
Absolutely. The first bullet. Some factors that might increase your risk of developing a heat-related illness will include high levels of humidity, obesity, fever, dehydration, some prescription drug use, heart disease, mental illness, poor circulation, sunburn, or alcohol use.
Next slide, Simon. So heat exhaustion is a condition that happens when your body overheats. Symptoms might include heavy sweating, a rapid pulse. It's one of 3 heat-related illnesses, with heat cramps being the most mildest one, and heat stroke being the most serious. Causes of heat illness include exposure to high temperatures, particularly when there is also high humidity and strenuous physical activity. With prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to, without prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to heat stroke and life-threatening conditions. Fortunately, heat exhaustion is preventable. Next slide. I want to do this one again. Dr. Hines, would you mind doing this? And then I'm going to come to Dr. Neighbor-Stephens. And you can comment more on each one as you want to.
Symptoms of heat exhaustion may start suddenly or progress over time, especially with prolonged periods of exercise. And they could include cool, moist skin with goosebumps when the heat, heavy sweating, faintness, dizziness, fatigue, a weak but rapid pulse, low blood pressure upon standing, which is usually going to make you feel dizzy.
I can't hear you right now.
So the other ones would be muscle cramps, nausea, and headache.
Now, all of these can be affected by the medication you take, especially taking diuretics, beta blockers, high blood pressure medicine, and even some psychiatric medicines, Dr. Walks, are affected, especially in heat. And even though I'm aiming this mainly at people in Dr. Walks' age group, this is doubly important for children and babies, that we have to be concerned about them and not leave them in cars, and be careful about even when we have them out in the park and run up and down the slide. We all have to be careful about people not being able to get rid of heat. Next slide.
Can I just add to
I would
that?
also, but before we move on,
Yes.
I was just
Sorry,
also
Dr.
going to say
Newman.
for your recreational folks, right? You're outside playing, you know, it's a lovely day. Even being out, for example, at a pool or at the beach, sometimes you may not notice some of these things because you're in the water. Sometimes that tiredness that you feel from the sun could easily be, you know, dehydration, dizziness. You're on your way, but you may not even notice it in the water. But water's not on the inside of your body, so just something to think about. And then other times too, like athletes in particular, there used to be a time when, you know, if you for your athletes. When you were exhibiting these symptoms and complaining about them, they were seen as a sign of weakness, right? Push through that headache, push through that nausea, just go ahead and throw up and keep it moving. Luckily, for the most part, that's not the approach that's taken anymore, but it's still something to think about when you're out there insisting on going for your morning, mid-afternoon jog. That's when you usually go, but also degrees and 80% humidity, that may not be the best time to do that.
Thank you. Next slide, Simon. Dr. Neighbor-Stephens.
When to see a doctor? If you think you have heat exhaustion, stop all activity and rest and drink. Move to a cooler place, water, that is, drink cool water, and I'm going to be very careful about how I say this, hydration drinks, because apparently we can maybe talk about this a little bit later. There's controversy right now about some drinks that are being excessively consumed apparently by people under 18 in their in the energy drink category. And what we're talking about are the hydration drinks. Contact your doctor if your symptoms get worse or they don't improve within an hour. If you're with someone who has heat exhaustion, seek immediate medical help if they become confused or distressed, lose consciousness, or are unable to drink. If their core body temperature measured by a rectal thermometer reaches 104 degrees or higher, they need immediate cooling and urgent medical attention. Now, let me comment on this. As a pediatrician, rectal temperatures are what I love to hear about. But if you're talking about in an emergency situation, I doubt that you'll have a rectal thermometer in your pocketbook unless you happen to have a young child with you. So if you have any instrument that can take the temperature and you understand how to use that instrument, and by that I mean you understand what its reading is relative to 0 and 32 degrees, so that you understand what it's really saying. Don't get hung up on the rectal thermometer, because what we don't want to see is someone whose internal temperature, which is most accurately measured by rectal temperatures, we don't want to see them above 101.
So just splash some cold water on me. Don't take my rectal temperature. Next slide, please. Those excellent points, Dr. Neighbors-Eaton.
Only a pediatrician would think about it.
So heat stroke. Without prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening condition that requires emergency medical attention. The management of heat stroke is giving them fluids and dunking them into a cool ice water bath as quickly as possible. A common symptom of heat stroke is an altered mental state or behavior, and that is the key right there. That's the pearl. Look for confusion. If they are confused, they are having heat stroke. If anybody is in the heat and they're feeling nauseous or just not quite right, they should take a break, hydrate with cool water, and just sit down and let their body cool down. Dr. Walks, I know for a fact that some people taking medicine for mental health have problems in heat too. How will we differentiate between something going on in that realm and confusion from heat stroke? Is there something we might know about that?
Dr. Maxey, I would recommend that we not take time to differentiate, because heat stroke can be absolutely deadly. So if someone is looking confused and they're in the heat, especially if they stop sweating, you want to get them. The one thing I would add to this slide is that they should take a break, hydrate, get out of the heat, hydrate with cool water, and just let yourself cool down. And after you make sure that they're not about to have a real problem with heat stroke, then you can begin to ask questions about differentiating whether they took their medicines, whether they had some sort of a change in their mental status that is not unusual for them, or someone who is a loved one or someone who is with them can tell you about what their normal reaction is. But when someone is in the heat and experiencing these symptoms, you want to get them out of the heat, get them some fluids, calm them, help them to cool down. That would be my advice. Now, I would love to have Dr. Lawson, who is with us and is a psychiatrist extraordinaire, to see if Dr. Lawson has something else to add to this concern about mental health or the status of mental health folks.
But first, did he invite you to have barbecue at his house yet?
No, man, you know how he is.
Not that. No, I just want to thank you for bringing this up. I just want to say there's a lot of literature now showing that there is a relationship between the climate and certain kinds of, quote, violent behavior. People not only become stuporous, but they also show problems with impulse control. And so it's not something you can do with a particular individual, But what we're finding is there's some real issues in terms of certain parts of the world, certain parts of the country, especially now when there's a worldwide pandemic of heat that's infecting a lot of citizens, not just crowding. There's something about the direct stimulation of the hypothalamus in terms of these kinds of extreme temperatures. But saying that, also, I'm glad you made the point also, don't bother to differentiate, because unfortunately, some people do become confused, don't know what's going on, and you don't know, is this because they had too much alcohol, for example, or drugs of abuse, or is it just that they've been out in the sun too long? And one of the interesting things that happened, as many of you know, is that the sensitivity to thirst disappears, and people stop drinking fluids when they've been exposed to heat for too long. So I think those are all excellent points. It's not something that you take lightly, and especially folks that are on some of our more common, quotes, leisurely drugs like alcohol and others, they can very quickly go into a situation in which they're in deep trouble health-wise.
You know, one of the things that comes to my mind, and maybe I'm being a bit cynical, but my mom and aunt used to always take me shopping in the summer, and they'd shop from dawn to dark. And I know the shopping centers now are more air conditioned, but sometimes that hard work of shopping all over the city in the heat, that can bother you as well. So we need to be careful about that and not put it to the side. Let's go to the next slide.
Can I just add one more thing about putting people in that cool ice water bath? Because I've actually been in a scenario where I was with someone who was experiencing heat stroke. And sometimes you don't have those things. You're not in a position to do that. We weren't. We were at the Grand Canyon, and we needed to drive to the nearest, hospital center. But one of the things that you can do in the meantime is you want to put ice packs, if you have them. You could we stopped at the 7-Eleven and got frozen peas, right? And you stick them in the armpits and in the groin area. Because and on the neck, right? And because those are places where you have a lot of blood flow, and that's a good place to put ice or cooling things to help somebody cool their body down until you can get to wherever the hospital destination is.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And in this slide, I just wanted to demonstrate that also you can get seizures, which can be a part of this, and rhabdomyolysis and kidney failure can happen. But the key thing is the mental confusion that you want to do an assessment on. Let's go to the next slide.
So Dr. Maxey, I know you touched on this earlier when you talked about blood pressure change when someone gets up. Dr. Gibson wanted to make sure that we emphasize that is orthostatic hypotension, so that when you get up, your blood pressure doesn't get up with you, and so folks can get up and fall down.
That's very true. And that can happen from sometimes diuretics, from the sweat that you lose, and you even lose fluid by breathing. Mm-hmm. And I read an estimate that you lose 1,500 cc's of fluid a day just by breathing alone. So it's not just urinating and taking diuretics, but it can also be the amount of breathing that you do. So what about prevention? Would you read this, Dr. Walks?
Happy to. Prevention. Overall, prevention and response to heat-related illness may vary under different circumstances. Dr. Hines just gave us a great on-the-ground, real-time example of the frozen peas from 7-Eleven can be a lifesaver. So those kinds of things can be absolutely critical. Second bullet, urban settings may have more older, lower income, and minoritized racial and ethnic groups who are more susceptible to heat-related illness, but who may live closer to medical facilities.
So this goes back to our discussion before, redlining, and the fact that
can we spend a little time on this, because this is a subject that, and I personally am trying to make sure that when we bring up an issue, we need to talk about solutions. Absolutely, prevention is the number one thing in our toolbox, is to prevent it from happening. But what are some other things that we need to do to help decrease the incidence of this? And this is a really serious issue because we're only going to get hotter. They said this may be the coolest summer that a lot of places see for the next several decades, unless there's some really significant changes in the way we address our carbon emissions. I've heard some very interesting discussions about urban response to this. Interestingly, I really haven't heard much about rural response, but urban response to this issue includes municipalities establishing cooling centers, even shelters for people who do not have air conditioning. We know that the urban center is going to be hotter because the street absorbs the heat and we don't have the trees to help shade and cool things down. One of the things I heard that I thought was very innovative, some group outfitted a school bus so that it became a mobile cooling station. I'm bringing this up because wherever you live, I'm willing to bet you got this issue in your city or your town. And as a citizen of that community, you need to hold your municipal officials to feet to the fire to address these issues in ways that will prevent death. We're not talking about something that is just making you uncomfortable. This is a condition that can lead to death.
Maybe we should go to the next slide, Dr. Neighbors. I think somebody to address.
Let me add to what Dr. Neighbors-Stevens is saying, and maybe it's on the next slide. But let me just make this comment. Finding out these things is really, in addition to making sure they're happening, finding out what is happening. A lot of jurisdictions do have cooling centers. Dr. Maxey mentioned the shopping centers, movie theaters. There are a lot of places where they keep things cool, and you need to know where those things are.
Don't leave out the libraries.
Don't leave out the libraries.
That's also the reason why some states are now moving to free public transportation for this reason, to allow people access to air-conditioned buses and things of that nature.
But my point that I want to get over, besides these great ideas that are being floated around, is to look at what's happening where you live and be an advocate for the changes necessary where you live with your city officials.
Okay. Good points. Good points. Next slide. So I read a review from the Death Valley Guide, and they had developed some policy advisories for people that they should drink between 24 and 42 ounces of water per hour if there's high heat. And we know that the heat in Death Valley is ridiculous, above 120. So they're recommending in that type of heat is between 24 and 32 ounces of water per hour in high heat. They also noted that some people would drive from Vegas for 2 hours, spend an hour and a half hiking in the 120-degree heat with only a 12-ounce water bottle. And they didn't eat, and they haven't been drinking, so heat exhaustion will obviously creep up on them. They also recommended salty stacks while out in the heat, other forms of electrolyte replacement. But he warned against some of these drinks that have a lot of sugar in them. And if you drink too much sugar too quickly, it can lead to nausea and vomiting. So we want to look at hydration drinks. We want to be concerned how much caffeine is in them, because that can increase your heart rate in a way that shouldn't be done. And we also want to make sure that the sugar level is not unduly elevated. Next slide.
Before you go, I just want to say the story that I was referencing before. There were 3 of us who went to the Grand Canyon, and we made all of these mistakes. And there was a guide at the Grand Canyon who saw us going down the path, and he said, how far are you guys going? And one of the people that was with us said, he's going to go over to the, go all the way down to the bottom and, come up the other side. Now, myself and the other lady that was with me, we weren't doing that because I'm seeing, as I'm going down, I'm seeing all these other people who are half passed out. People are crying because they're exhausted and tired. But that is exactly what happened. We went, had a regular, we had more than 12 ounces, but it was a regular water bottle. No one had eaten anything. I think the one guy had a banana. And we didn't have any snacks. And he did not heed the warning and went on, did exactly what he planned to do. We turned around because I realized that this seemed kind of awkward, all these other people. So then we came back up and we ended up meeting him a couple hours later where we were supposed to. He was late because he was confused. He was, it was a mess. As soon as we had already called the Rangers to kind of be looking for him because it had gotten really late, but we made every single one of these mistakes on this paper. Well, we didn't because we turned around, but the scenario, we were unprepared is what I'm trying to say.
The key thing about many of us, we overestimate our physical fitness and what we can do. So we have to be more. Next slide. So Dr. Walker, you want to do this one?
Sure. This is about delayed heat exhaustion. And again, from the Death Valley Guide. Point number 1, heat-related emergency calls in the hottest season tend to follow a pattern. There are 2 periods. Calls will come in. One is midday for someone on a trail who might be experiencing heat exhaustion. The next wave of calls, we're told, comes late at night around 10 p.m. or even later after people have spent the entire day hiking, and then they get back to their hotel, realize they're feeling ill, and start to develop some of the symptoms of heat stroke. Progression of heat-related illness may occur over many hours, can happen if someone has been exposed to outdoor heat for longer periods of time, or hiked extensively during the day.
So the lesson here is that it's not just something that can happen then, but when you get back to your hotel and you think you're cool, you can still get sick. So you still need to be observant of yourself and whoever is with you in that heat, because it can come back on you.
Can I just say, Dr. Maxey, that I have an issue with this slide because you don't have to go to the Grand Canyon or Death Valley or on a hiking trail. You can just be trying to walk to church and back. You can be trying to walk your kids to summer camp and back. As Dr. Neighbor Stephen said earlier, these are issues in a lot of urban communities. So take this Death Valley thing and apply it to 29th and Western in Los Angeles, because there are times when we aren't doing any of the stuff we think is bad, and we're putting ourselves at risk.
Okay. It brings me to a thought. I was at Bishop Noel Jones Church some months ago, and we were taking blood pressures. As members come out from the sermon and all the things that we do in our churches, everybody had super high blood pressure. We'll comment on that later. Next slide.
Must have been a good sermon.
It always is. So would one of you read this one?
Delayed onset of heat exhaustion. According to the CDC, heat exhaustion can develop even several days after exposure. The Mayo Clinic also says prolonged periods of exercise can lead to heat exhaustion's progression over time instead of a sudden onset. For heat-related emergencies, rapid cooling is the standard of care. Immersion or dousing in cold water, removing clothing, applying ice packs or frozen peas, fanning, elevating feet, and monitoring airway and breathing. For milder cases, patients should seek shade or air conditioning and sip cool fluids.
Next slide. So there's another heat-related problem, and Dr. Gibson suggested this. I looked up some of the articles that he sent. Maybe one of you could go through this with me. It's kind of small looking for me.
Sure.
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
So kidney stones in kids. 30 years ago, kidney stones were considered a disease of middle-aged white men. Now doctors are increasingly seeing a different kind of patient suffering from the extremely painful condition, especially during summer. Kidney stones are hard deposits of minerals and salts that can get caught in the urinary tract and are now occurring in younger people, particularly among teenage girls, is what the emerging data is showing. Experts aren't sure why more children and teens are having these kidney stones, but they speculate that a combination of factors are to blame, including diets high in ultra-processed foods, increased use of antibiotics early in life, and climate change are causing more cases of dehydration.
Next slide. Go ahead, Doctor.
So kidney stones in kids. The research published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that the annual incidence of kidney stone disease rose 16% from 1997 to 2012, with 15 to 19-year-olds experiencing the greatest increase. Within this age group, kidney stone incidence was 52% higher among girls and women. The disease became more common in men beginning at age 25. Wow.
Next slide. Simon, let's stop here. So I thank everybody for helping me read those slides. What we want to do, just discuss, we know we're in a heat wave right now. I was with some friends last night. This gentleman had gone fishing by himself and was in a boat. And he noticed he was having pain in his knees. And he surmised that sunlight had burned his knees. He said he had also gotten the COVID vaccination 2 months before, and he was blaming the COVID vaccination, the Moderna. And I said, that's not likely to have happened. He said, well, the sunlight got to my knees. I said, if you get on blue jeans, it wouldn't. But there's some kind of material, plastic or rubber, in some of these blue jeans, and that was the cause that the UV light would heat those up, and he actually has sloughing of tissue off his knees. So this heat can really bother you. Any questions or comments in the chat? That's Neighbor Stevens or any co-moderators?
No comments in the chat at this time.
All right.
One
So-
of the things that I do think is interesting, in listening to this talk was Dr. Neighbor Stevens, during it, you said last year, right? This is supposed to be one of the, coolest summers over the next decade. And certainly we are definitely on pace to be hotter than we were last year. So it is unfortunate how right you were.
I wanted to bring up something that I heard on the news, well, several times actually, this week here in Nashville. We were receiving admonitions on the news about the possibility of cars catching on fire because of the heat. And I had never heard of that before. And they were saying, but it has been happening. And that's why they brought it up on the news. And they said that just parking in the shade does not prevent it. Um, and they didn't go into any specific model car or specific temperature or anything like that. But they were just, advising the public to be aware that cars can catch on fire because it's too hot. And they were suggesting that you consider putting a fire extinguisher in your car in case you get caught in this situation. So as time goes on, we're going to learn, I think, more and more about complications in our lives that are related to excessive heat. And we need to, as we are often want to say, we want to use common sense as we are running around in the middle of the day at the hottest time of the day, and employ some of these things that we all know are true, but we, for whatever reason, choose not to practice.
I don't think the Rolls Royce that sits in Dr. Walt's driveway would catch on fire. I hope not.
So Dr. Maxey, let me respond to that with two comments. One is that is not a Rolls Royce in my driveway. It may look that way because it's old, but let me say something else on behalf of the pediatricians. And as a child who used to cause a lot of trouble, I had to unlatch something inside of my car after it was sitting outside in the heat, and it actually burned my hand. I don't mean like it was warm to the touch or was hot to the touch, but it hurt. I had to let go, and then I had to do all of because it actually burned my hand. So if you have a misbehaving child and you put them in a hot car, do not assume they're crying just because they want to behave like me. It can be absolutely damaging to a child to put them in a hot car or put them into a hot car seat or have that. Cars can get really hot inside. No, I didn't forget the child. I didn't leave the child in the car, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be careful with your kids when you're putting them on a hot seat.
And the other thing I noticed that we were always told when you park your car in a parking lot, don't put the windows all the way up, leave a quarter inch, a half inch, so the heat doesn't build up excessively and blow your windows out. But we're at the top of the hour now. Maybe we can talk about final comments as we go. Dr. Hines?
One of the things that Dr. Nabert-Stevens brought up is just things that increasingly to be aware of as we deal with these heat challenges. And there are a lot of things in the news to capture our attention these days. But one of the things that is also in the news is around things like in your various states and in your various cities, paying attention to the comments that are being made about your electrical grids. Because even in Maryland, there are comments being made about the electrical grid not being able to overall tolerate the amount of energy use that's going to come with people trying to deal with all of this heat. Things like the Metro Rail, like our Metro trains slowed down because it was so hot. So just paying attention to some of the other things in your environment, because all that is also going to be about preparation. Because if we do rolling blackouts, because that was one of the things that is in discussion in Maryland, is some rolling blackouts, then you're going to need to be prepared, right? You're going to need to have supplies and things like that, and a plan available to you. So readiness is important.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hines. Dr. Waltz?
Okay, y'all aren't gonna scare me too much because when I watch and get information, another reason that some of the metro trains are slowing down is because the tracks may buckle from the heat. The side are buckling from the heat as we're trying to walk, and I am too old to fall down. So it's important for us to watch where we're stepping and watch where we are walking, because once the sidewalks buckle, they don't just settle back into place because it's cooled off or it's nighttime or it's dark. So I think there's a lot of which to be aware with what's happening with the heat right now, and it's really taking a toll on our infrastructure. And we have to be very careful to just pay attention. Just look where you're stepping, watch where you're driving. It's a time to just be thoughtful and to be careful.
May I ask you a quick question before Dr. Neighbor Stevens speaks? Dr. Walker, you were the Director of
Absolutely.
Public Health for the city of Washington, D.C. What happened after all those tanks on the 14th of June went around the streets in D.C.? Did they tear up the streets at all?
Dr. Maxey, I want you to be sure to be careful with your questions, because we always get accurate reports from the federal government, and they have assured us that there was minimal, if any, damage from all those crazy tanks rolling down the street. So I don't want you thinking that you can just listen to people who make stuff up. We have been assured by the government that there was very minimal damage.
Very good.
Yes,
Government
Dr.
always
Maxey,
tells
stuff
they
like
always-
that tears up the streets, okay? Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
it tears up the streets. Come on.
Dr. Barbara Neighbor Stevens.
So my final comments are going to be visual. I don't know that you all paid any attention to my blouse, but I particularly put on this white blouse to remind people to wear clothing that will help reflect the heat. My final
Okay.
apparel item is my straw hat, which I have been wearing when I go out, because my grandmother always fussed at me about going out of the house in the summer without my hat on. And the wider the brim, the better. So those are my final comments.
Okay,
Thank
wait. I have to jump in, Dr. Maxey, because there once was a time when I would say, oh, well, I'm not really light skinned, so the sun's not going to bother me. It doesn't matter if you are lighter and you can pass the paper bag test or you can't. We really do have to take care of our skin in direct sunlight. So don't listen to folks or correct folks when they say, oh, well, I'm real dark, I don't have to worry about the sun.
No, thank you, Dr. Walker. That's a very relevant comment. And as my final comment for today, I'm going to say welcome you back next week. Dr. Lawson is going to be our guest, and he will join us. And everybody have a great, great Sunday, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, Simon, for helping so much. Have a great day.
Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Bye.